Alrighty, April 2017 Webbot report summary. I think it was 44 or so pages. Again, I just do a summary of the things that I feel like I want to discuss in that report. There's a bit more on Antarctica. I only have one article, paragraph at the end of this report, this summary, covering a piece of it. There's more in the report if you're interested in that. Again, you can buy these reports for the extremely low price of $15 at Cliff High's website, halfpasthuman.com. Anyways, interesting nonetheless. I read the whole thing today and I pick out the parts I want. So yeah, we got some issues. We got some issues in the future, okay? But it does still appear that Bitcoin, gold, silver are still going to be there to help protect us in a good way. So he names this report 2 tribes. Forecasts for April 2017 through 2034. The only thing I'm going to tell you is that you may expect things based off of this report to be this summer, this August, this September, and it may not be. Timing may be wrong. It's just the nature of the beast with this webbot. But just understand what it's saying. Keep that in the back of your mind for a future near you soon. The storms sets have forecasts of massive amounts of rain being poured out of the sky onto coastlines in such volumes as to cause both floods and fires. The fires are showing as being in the middle areas of the continents, as those are going to be drying out and entering into severe drought as the precipitation patterns shift radically, favoring dumping along western coasts. These sets are forecasting the west coasts as being flooded out and valleys filled up and hillsides draining for months. These rainstorm sets have the coastal flooding leading directly to several years of central region dust storms and dry/cracking ground for thousands of square miles. These sets are forecasting impacts on human agriculture at the level of the giant farms. These sets are providing supporting subsets for the earthquakes and seismic activity sets that are forecasting a bowl-creating effect from earthquakes over 2017 and 2018. These rainstorm sets are suggesting that the West Coast earthquakes across the Northern Hemisphere will be affected by the supersaturation of the ground with tens of millions of pounds of water. So I was just thinking about that when I read that first piece. It reminded me of the Oroville Dam. And they talked about then how many, many years ago and in different parts of the world, when they'd have these flooding situations, not necessarily of a dam, but just of a body of water, in this case the one that fed the dam, becoming so saturated, so heavy, that months later, the weight or whatever it was ended up causing a sizable earthquake in that region. And this has happened numerous times throughout the planet for that reason. So I saw this and then saw what he said, tens of millions of pounds of water. West Coast, California, man, I sure hope not. Yet more sets are growing in the inland seas and rivers changing course, supporting chain. These new sets are describing rivers that are going to decide to go walkabout as they seek a new path. These are distinctly flooding sets, but within the flooding are sets about the rivers that caused the flood to be carving out new riverbeds in the middle of the flooding. The rivers changing course sets are also filled with boats over parking lots and flooded out malls with paddleboards and canoes being used in videos taken from inside. While we have the large areas of growth for climate change, and within those sets, the dominating subset is ice age, the data is bringing in details painting a picture of a late spring but suddenly hot summer over much of the northern hemisphere. These sets have major forest fires in the Americas as well as across Siberia. Further sets are suggesting that solar irradiation will be the denied cause for the sudden blinding of farm animals as well as the near instant heat reaction of many northern peoples on their southern journeys as in vacations. These sets have the solar irradiation being shockingly hot, very brilliant, even as the sun rises, and incredibly colorful as the sun sets. The new growth for the exceptionally hot summer over much of the northern hemisphere is described as sudden in its appearance after a wet and cold and delayed spring. The new growth has the hot summer being kicked off with reports of celebrities who will have journeyed south and then collided with overwhelming solar exposure. These celebrities are indicated to create a huge splash in the global media for weeks. In spite of the scary hot summer, the number of sets for ice age conditions over the rest of 2017 and beyond continue to grow rapidly. And I don't know if I included it in here. It may be the next piece, but before I forget, in case I didn't include it, talked about chemtrail spraying and that these upper atmosphere, new spraying, whatever, somehow it was going to lead to fog coming down, which essentially is a cloud on the ground, right? Fog. Except it was going to be more or less a chemtrail fog on the ground. And it would cause interesting things with the power lines arcing and things like that because of like the silver, barium and stuff that's in there. Or not necessarily silver, but whatever particles or, ingredients, if you will, make up these chemtrails. And not only that, when some of the forest fires start happening, that chemical mixture helps it along the way. So I don't remember if I covered that in here, but it just hit me, so I want to say that in case I didn't. Global pop entity. New forms of economic impacts are also forecast from fashion as humanity reacts to the increasing harsh white light from the sun. These sets have goggles, although he spelled it Googles. I think he misspelled that. Goggles becoming the new fashion accessory. Some of the other impacts from the growing visibility of drastic climate change, including the dwindling airplane flights, as even the most shallow celebrities will decide that the proposed trips are not worth the radiation hazards of flying. There are also sets for radiation-hardened aircraft to be touted and even created. Other sets have the push for high-speed rail being kicked off globally by a huge push in USA Pop that is forecasting the bringing together of the former enemies of the Trump administration and Hollywood. These sets have much of the new nice on the part of Hollywood being a reaction to the flying radiation effects, stories gaining much meme space over 2017 and beyond. Within the fashion subsets are forecast that anti-radiation clothing will be both sold to and sold by many of these celebrities who will be publicly identified as being most at risk later in the early summer. The data sets have the advertising campaign that will develop around the anti-radiation clothing as being protect your nads from rads. I like that. We need to go copyright that, trademark that quickly. Protect your nads from rads. I love it. Some aspects of the US dollar woes as reserve currency are showing as affecting all of global humanity. Rather than duplicate much of the same information, please see the USA Pop section for dollar areas and the ramification forecasts, as many of these will be replicated to a greater or lesser extent outside the US based on levels of reliance on the dollar. And now for the we don't know where it is pop data sets. We have many new data sets for the big stink that are suggesting that whether most likely rivers in the atmosphere, which by the way was an absolute Webbot hit. They're describing atmospheric rivers, and that has happened recently, and the news has covered it. Amazing. Will be causing a big stink that is forecast to last 4 months. Not 4 months, but last for many months. Get horrifically bad in the heat of summer and send tens of thousands fleeing repeatedly, i.e. diaspora. This last is about evacuations that will be on, then off, so many times as to elicit jokes in the media. These sets have the big stink being caused by runoff or water overflow into some form of chemical plant such that nasty smells are created that will refuse to leave. These sets have the stink lasting for at least 4 months with ferocity, then slowly fading after a brilliant solution is proposed, which actually is forecast to work and be cheap. The big stink sets are filled with supporting sets for animals being affected, as well as plastics and rubber being at risk from the big stink. The data sets would suggest this to be in North America, but there are so many confusing and contradictory place names as to prevent any narrowing of location. It does appear to be Northern Hemisphere placed, but beyond that, and the supposition that we are to but a few weeks away from its appearance due to the prevalent immediacy data types, the data provides no further details other than to say that for the first few months, the whole of the big stink will be wafting through the woo-woo community as conspiracy theories are pro-offered for the nasty smells. Pop War. Some of these new Pop War sets have more references to Germany and France than other geographic locations, and are focusing on destruction of the past to such an extent that all the language around the refugee crisis will change, with refugees becoming synonymous with barbarian. These sets are providing some of the pivotal shifts in emotional tones away from the Western power elites and their cultural engineering. The fires of art are showing as a very key set of temporal markers for the global pop redefinition of the invading migrants. It is at the point that these temporal markers manifest that the language that is used to frame Islam as a religion will also begin to change. These sets as temporal markers are also showing as manifesting prior to the European spring that will fade into the summer of pop war. The summer of pop war in Europe is forecast to lead several incidents of government going after citizens as instigators of hate crimes. This is showing as setting up a rebound effect as the politicians and judicial members are confronted by their fellow citizens in continuous response to labeling of the cultural defense as hate. These sets have serious confrontations emerging that will require the use of police to extract the politicians. Question is, will the police respond? And if so, on which side? It appears the most recent data sets are forecasting that the long blue police line between civilization and barbaric chaos is going to assert itself. This is showing as being shocking and condemned by progressive/corporate media, which to me means the police are going to side with the people, not the immigrants. Canada pop. Canada real estate is emerging in the data sets as an explosion. These sets have both commercial and residential real estate going into an explosive geyser that is showing as one of three major economic brittle areas. Only Canada associated one, other two are China, real estate excesses and global political investment that are indicated to be the global pivot into crashing currencies and deflationary wave. These sets have the Canadian real estate market reaching a stage of crack-up boom, followed by a short gap of no new activities, then a sudden slump downward in both price and sales. These sets are arguing for a period of only weeks in which all the language is forecast to switch directions, such that the discussion will suddenly indicate discounts and price reduction in plunging sales, in failing bank loans, and rolling back sales. The number of new sets for government schemes and banking incentives, there are a number of new sets for government schemes and banking incentives, but the data sets have supporting subsets for the real estate market scheme to be hitting a wall within mere days of its inception. These sets have the national politicians being accused of all sorts of corruption over the real estate facts that are forecast to emerge as the banking implosion of real estate loans begins to overturn local tax base stability. Other sets within Global Pop are showing that yet more fires will be an issue over the brief but intense summer in the northern woods. Again, the politicians are going to receive condemnation for doing nothing as hundreds of millions of dollars in damage occurs. Also note the ferocity of the fires will be linked to the aluminum dust from chemtrails. These fire damage sets are suggesting that Canadian authorities are going to also be under fire and threat of firing for most of the time between now and summer 2018. Note that 2018, because the data has the situation causing such problems this year as to create very large anxiety levels over the rest of the year just from the anticipation of what might occur in the summer of 2018. China Pop. Much of the new data for China Pop have new levels of currencies distress that has been unknown since the last century. The data has a curious form of hyperinflation starting to take hold of the Chinese monetary system. These sets have China Pop being the proximate cause for the escalation currencies crisis as their currency becomes excessively traded. This language is suggestive of a currency play being operated within the global currencies exchange system. These sets have major contention and crashing in agonizing slowness. These sets have the currencies crisis in China Pop reaching the point of threatening governance and social stability. The new sets of have hyperinflation showing first in late May, then ramping up over June to the point that global outcry is heard from the financial system. USA Pop. The data sets, there's a lot in USA Pop, by the way. I copied quite a bit in here, but I had to finish with the markets like I usually do. But anyways, this is a good size section here. USA Pop. The data sets have the late summer affecting USA Pop in the wallets as the currencies in crisis grow to include the euro as well as the dollar-dependent republics. These new currencies in crisis sets have the debt creation rates falling, described in language as unsustainable levels. These sets have many references to banks and savings associations as well as money center banks, all being impacted by the severe credit freeze, which is described as being from crashing credit creation. This last set is associated with European banks. This chain of credit events is indicated to rapidly impact the spending patterns of both people and government here in the USA. While the first of the credit freeze problem sets accrues in model space in mid-June, the largest rise in supporting sets for a rolling credit problem appear for late August, with a jump in growth of the sets across mid-September. The data sets have new language for the gold fever, leading to direct confrontations with officialdom, as some gold mines will be declared to be illegal. Note that some of the mines will be hidden resources that the miners will simply ignore the government orders. Others are showing up as what we will label as potlatch mines. These are going to be cooperative efforts of like-minded individuals who will collect together for the purpose of rapid extraction of as much ore as possible in a short amount of time as possible. The ideal coming across is of a mine that may be running for only a few days, which will leave a huge mess and dangerous holes in the ground. These new sets are forecasting that the popular pastime of metal hunting is going to shift many people with metal detectors over to prospecting. These and other sets are bringing in new language about gold rush and most notably a silver rush. These sets are accruing as model space is moved through summer 2017. The silver rush sets are joined in their supporting chain by our longer term sets for a great silver call out by officialdom via corporations who will be sending out street assayers and silver buyers. We buy silver. Here's a sign. We buy silver. The financial situation within the USA Pop as regards to retirement systems, both corporate and municipal, are indicated to be folding up like a house of cards. The data sets have the USA Pop going into debt at the lowest rate measured in decades. These sets have the portion of failure debt over time being never greater. These sets have cross-links to the internationalists, aka globalists, as being scared of the rate of contraction of the U.S. financial system. Note this is not the economy, but again, the system of finance built around debt money issuing banks. The financial disasters sets have many supporting sets for healthcare and the collapsing of the medical system within USA Pop. The data sets have the collapsing language specifically focused on the medical side of the healthcare industry. These sets are holding up the medical practices as being the point of failure rather than the insurance. These sets are suggesting that the medical profession, specifically focusing on medical doctors, are showing up as breaking as the medical billing system that ties nationally to the other center federal government. The data accrues over July with some spikes for breaking medical monopoly and priced out of purchase range, and many other sets for extreme pricing for medical procedures. These sets have a growing subset of support that are cross-linked over to both the Space Ghost Farts entity, where the terminating sets are within the Antarctica Discovery, or the Discovery sets, and the Markets entity, where the terminating sets are interest rates and derivatives based. These latter sets are, at first glance, a curious connection until the lower level supporting sets are examined. These sets expose new values for monopoly crashing that are specifically focused on instant competition in the form of new electrics, medical devices that are forecast to treat energetics and eliminate prescriptions, mostly eliminate them. The idea is that some form of information that is described now will be described then as startling new medical device will be coming out over summer northern hemisphere in such a manner as to cause major gnashing of teeth and other signs of internal turmoil and freak out within both the pharmaceutical and medical establishments. Again, this summer, next summer. I'm not sure which summer. A rapidly growing major set within the USA Pop is the employment crash. These sets have been around for several years and are now growing more rapidly than most of the other sets within USA Pop. These sets are suggesting that a financial systems crash will lead to quick layoffs of millions at the financial firms as the financial firms hit a new low in both shares prices and income. The data sets have also the social media platforms as well as larger technology firms' software also being battered by mass layoffs. On the top of the piled up debt stink from regional banks, the data has the federal system itself be under threat from several levels of the debt-based money pyramid scheme. The debt stink not only indicates student loans but also auto loans. These sets have the auto loans going into subprime failure over April and May, such that a new fiscal crisis is raging before summer even starts. The subprime auto loans failure is growing again in the data sets as yet more new aspects for housing in USA Pop going into free fall on prices, even as the marketplace is flooded. The flooded words are really interesting, as in some areas we have floods of new offerings in the housing market at that location. In other areas we have flooding, as in house floor underwater, being a cause for prices falling, as the stability of large areas put the market into severe distress. There are sets for some areas to have property prices fall to the level that raw land, even in large areas, tracts, acres, whatever, will be offered for trade, as the prospects for cash sales will be dwindling daily. These sets have new supplies of recently foreclosed houses being dumped onto the local market by both banks and foreign buyers. These latter sets are suggesting that foreign owners are going to also be cash squeezed and will also want to get out from under the dropping prices of their foreign holdings, which is their property in the USA. These sets have also have a very rapid response within the markets, as it describes wary owners and jittery sellers combining to be pushing markets price boundaries very rapidly. These sets are suggesting that the market is going to feel like a race or contest for the last buyer. Further sets are suggesting that all cash is going to become the norm, as the bank lending into USA Pop will be cratering as the banks hit liquidity walls. These sets also have some numbers in which reported sales will be occurring for multiple $1 million properties for real cash that amounts to 20% of the financed asking price. So think $1 million house. If you've got cash money, we'll take $200K. Or this house happens to be $100K, we'll take $20K. It's yours as long as you got cash. These sets and others have growing presence in the USA Pop sets going forward as the real estate market crash and the greater USA Depression. These sets also have the municipal and local governance bodies being freaked out over the collapsing tax base. In many of these sets, we have the freak out hitting the this summer as the collapsing tax base meets budget planning for the upcoming fiscal year. These sets have the 20 cents on the dollar meme becoming a fear chant in the government offices as they consider 80% reduction in revenue. The impact of the boiling rumor stage of the pedophile ring, #pedophile ring, is showing as stewing both Democratic as well as Republican politicians. The data has indications that major elected officialdom, both current and former, will be in the news for their actions related to the investigation. Note that we still have suicides of both organic and assisted that will be coming out of this ongoing meme. And if you haven't heard recently, former guy connected somewhat to the Bernie Madoff scandal just jumped off of a building a few days ago, killed himself. The data growth for gold has risen to levels never before seen. This is true across all the entities, including USA Pop and markets. The data sets have the gold reference or references within USA Pop centered around gold rush. The gold rush language is showing up as a mining boom at all levels, from individuals panning for gold to commercial gold mines. These data sets are rising as model space is moved over May and June, and then have a burst of new growth just about halfway into August. In this bursting of new data sets for gold and gold rush, there are sets that are forecasting the fears about gold going no availability, reaching the point of open discussions that will reach alternative media. These no offer sets have enormous crosslinks terminating in fear sets in the powers that be entity, as well as the subsets of USA Pop that are deep state centered. These no gold to buy sets are also cross-linked internally within USA Pop to a central government shakeup, noting that it is not central bank nor federal government, but rather central government causes the interpretation to shudder to a confused halt. Other sets in the supporting chain provide only faint clues to the real nature of the central government that is going to be shaken up and cleansed. These hints would seem to be focusing on aspects of the deep state itself rather than any of the above-ground governance bodies. However, it is clearly the above-ground groups that are freaking out over gold price. Pensions are showing up in the data sets as being the objects of attempted raids by both government and private corporations. These sets have pensions being in cascading crash mode from late April through the rest of the year, but with lots of news coming out about specific pension plans over summer, with a near-term peak in the verbiage about crashing pension systems most likely to hit in late July. New data accruing to USA Pop as model space is moved through July and into August has the language about massive layoffs and unemployment at 80% showing up in the national discussion. Now, I don't know, unemployment at 80%, I'm not sure what that means. It could mean that the unemployment rates of last month or this time last year were 80% higher than they were last year. That doesn't mean 80% of our population is now unemployed, okay? But this is just what the key word is. The new data sets for rich freaking out at the as the summer progresses. These sets have the rich reaching out a point of open freakout that will be visible in summer. The open freakout is going to break out as language about repudiation. The idea of repudiation is described as springing from the masses and will cause the freakout, as the idea of repudiation is for the people to forgive all the debt, including the national debt. This idea of a people-induced national jubilee, or forgiveness of debt, is described as causing projectile vomiting in the debt money centers. It can be noted that both Ripple and Etherium, cryptocurrencies, right? It can be noted that both Ripple and Ethereum have upward price measures that are hinted to be manifesting over late April. These are suggested to create something of a boost or boom primarily in Ethereum and Ethereum wallet installations, with some new economic activities developing around installing Ethernet wallets. Ethereum wallets. The data would seem to be hinting at some announcement of partnering to release devices with these wallets pre-installed. Note that not a lot of longer-term data sets here, with most of the set being composed of shorter-term values. These sets have a panic-to-buy situation developing later in summer, primarily affecting USA Pop, in which Ethereum will be seen as the next Bitcoin, with those words being referenced explicitly. Hence, they are our temporal marker for the bulge in the emotional values around Ethereum. This is to say, when you are reading the words in general financial websites that Ethereum is the next Bitcoin, and there had been a recent bit jump up in the US dollar price of Bitcoin, then we will be at the height of the emotional curve of that phase. This emotional zenith probably will not be coincident with the price zenith near term, as we can expect the price to rise a bit further. However, the temporal marker of the headlines and the previously exciting rise in the US dollar price of Bitcoin could and perhaps should be taken as an indication of the soon-to-be waning emotional flush for Ethereum. Within the data sets, we frequently see these emotional building tension zeniths just before the jump into release of tension, which can accompany selling and profit taking. So it's saying Ethereum's going to go up pretty nicely, but it's also going to come back down, so be careful. Also note lots of the base sets are explicitly focused on speculations within Ethereum. These were also noted back in 2003 prior to the crash of the price of Bitcoin. Ripple is also showing as having upward pressure for price. However, in this case, the data is not referencing either speculations nor owner emotional excitement. Rather, we have the price for Ripple being impacted by increasing desperation from banks. These sets have yet more pressures for an upward price movement, albeit tepid compared to Ethereum coin. Other interesting aspects of Ripple include longer-term values growing in sets that are parallel to the rising panic within the banking system. This appears to bear watching, as there may be some explicit relationships between Ripple price and banking system health. Bitcoin is continuing to show a rapid pace upward, with these sets having cross-links over to the hyperinflation sets within markets as well as global pop. The data sets are still showing Bitcoin to be a wealth store rather than a speculation play, but also now we have new data sets that are suggesting that some form of funds will be allowed to trade Bitcoins, with the clear understanding that these are inter-fund trading between members. The data has these being allowed as long as there is no blockchain interaction with the various trades. This will turn out very badly according to the longer term sets, but the bad decision part of these sets are not forecast as manifesting for at least a year. The bad decision will not affect Bitcoin nor the blockchain, but appears to be limited to the funds playing with themselves only. That noted, we do have some language for yet another spring burst of Bitcoin enthusiasm that is showing up as upward pressure in the dollar price of Bitcoin. The longer term sets in this supporting chain continue to bring in prices that will be $13,000 US in 2018, while at that time the noted price of gold within model space would be near $4,500. And this final piece is called metal space, he calls it, about metals. The new data has near-term target goals as numeric values showing up for silver that are reinforcing our old forecast of gaps following a pushing up through $22. These gaps are defined as being discussed with silver at $26, $28, $38. These gaps are coincident with rapid growth in sets for political instability in several parts of the globe, including China Pop and USA Pop. In both these entity areas, the directly held sets for silver show developing exchange problems as well as delivery delays and supply exhaustion. The data sets have the daily price jumps in silver being over $20 US. These sets are suggesting that capping is going to be the rule, as the powers in commodities are described as chasing or trying to run ahead of the silver price. However, the data shows that prices panics within metals has prices jumping too fast. The gap language grows steadily as model spaces move through June, July, and August. Then the language rate of growth itself gaps up in August. The chasing prices sets began in model space in March and grow through the month to reach visibility in April. These sets have temporal markers that appear to be associated with the tax reports, which is to say the reports about taxes provided to government, IRS income coming into the government. Within USA Pop, there are sets for tax revolt and tax failures and taxing system problems, all of which accrue to model space coincident with silver price pressures and breaking away from control. These breaking away from control sets contain data for politicians in chaos, exhaustion in the currencies, exchanges underwater, currencies in crisis, societies in disarray, and sets for peaking near-term social pressures. These sets have their largest growth across late April and into May. The implication is that our breaking point has this as its most probable period of manifestation within the forecast range of the shorter-term data. The data sets have global financial chaos escalating over these months and then holding a more or less even tension level through June and into early July. That is to say, the financial chaos and financial tensions and global economic chaos and global political chaos is not going to abate, but it shows as not having any particular impact on precious metals until into mid-July. From that point, model space gains more language about hyperinflation associated with Federal Reserve, while also gaining more language about rising silver prices. We also need to note that the premiums to be paid for silver are indicated to be escalating globally as the price for silver first gets loose from its bounds, then is recaptured at a higher price. At that point, the data has a very large growth spurt in new sets supporting the premiums spike language. Further along with this language for spiking premiums, the data has unavailability and supply disruptions language at large levels of support. Much of the new language around gold is filled with options collapse and settlements failures and deliveries failures and other similar descriptors going to the idea of a window of failure opening up under the banks. The data sets have big problems with actual physical delivery. These sets are supported by clearing and breaking of the ability to open the doors. These sets are also supported by supported by the hyperinflation language. These sets are also cross-linked over to the bank failures that are going to be gigantic in terms of the dollar's net out. The data has the sucking sound being an indrawn breath, as the strong physical buying for silver is described as getting out of hand. Interesting language brings in sparks and coils and capacity and overheating, and other language that the pent-up financial energy relative to silver is beyond the capacity of the paper markets to address. The data has silver as a market going to shift into physical delivery as demand needs start to escalate both at the vault and industrial levels. It is the industrial demands for silver that are going to be so spectacular. The data is forecasting that the new sciences of field manipulations will be very silver intensive in their industries. The data sets have the currency crisis heating up across the next few months through May, as the euro is described as dropping through all floors. These sets are focusing on the breakup of the European Union and its currency issuance authority being neutered. New sets for gold and silver have specific language for rapid rise and jumping faster than rates. Other new sets for gold being chased by interest rates, as these sets are accrued to model space and late something, I don't have the next word. These sets have very large cross links over to China Pop. Many of the terminating sets are within sets for rising unemployment and civil strife. The gold price rise is indicated to be a relief to the rioting and aggressive population. The data sets have the China Pop sets contributing to the language about gold to be equal to $4,800 US. These sets are showing that destructive inflation is going to be rising in China at such a rate as to create pressure on gold and silver and Bitcoin. In the gold sets, we have negative interest rates colliding with the rising rates and the jumping price of gold and silver. Final paragraph. The new sets within the Antarctica, the discovery, larger linguistic structure, are focusing on a period of nearly 1 century ago. These sets are suggesting that something that occurred in the second decade of the 1900s that will be directly affecting the Antarctica discovery. These sets have the links between these two periods coming out in a visit to the Antarctica discovery by a dignitary over these next few months. The unique aspect of this visit is showing up as being related to silver, and that the personality involved, aka the dignitary or celebrity, will be inextricably be related to silver. This celebrity visit is indicated to act as a large temporal marker for both Antarctica, the discovery, as well as silver, specifically in its transition to the hyper technology key industrial material, or transition to hyper technology key industrial metal. Whoa. Again, if you want more of that, and there's a lot more in that report, www.halfpasthuman.com. $15 or a fraction of a Bitcoin, which he accepts both money that way and Bitcoin. You can have one. Full report. I will always support Cliff High. And if you support the work he does, throw him a bone if you feel like it by buying a report. Otherwise, you're going to have to settle for my summary and miss out on quite a few things. But again, I pick what I feel is the most important stuff I want to talk about. And I've had people, no, get back on the space stuff. The space goat's far, man. I want to hear more about that. I know. And if I had more time and stuff, I would do it. But I don't, so I have to leave that out and focus on other stuff. Financial, gold, silver, markets, USA, all this stuff. It's just more important to me than the space stuff. And even the Antarctica stuff. So I'll added that one little paragraph to the end of this just because it was quite interesting. But again, there's more of that stuff in there. So if you want it, go and get it. Take care.